Hello and welcome back to Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anushka Matanda-Dowty. Now, for the past 8 weeks, I've been here at the Lower Manhattan Court, the Southern District of New York Court, here in New York, watching this trial and giving you the updates. You've been with us since last November when we were covering civil cases. Remember, those are concerned with Diddy's money, compensation for alleged acts or cognizable damages. We've followed every twist and turn of this case and every released and unreleased Ye song where he's sampling Diddy's kids or Diddy himself. Now, inside that courtroom, we've had 7 weeks of evidence from the prosecution. They called to the stand Cassie Ventura, who was in an 11-year relationship with Diddy, Jane, who's using a pseudonym to protect her identity. Both of those women testified to alleged years of abuse. They say they were forced to participate in sexual performances we've come to know as freak-offs or wild king nights or hotel nights. We also heard about bombshell balcony dangling allegations. We heard about alleged bribery. We heard about distribution of drugs. We heard about alleged arson with Kid Cudi's car. Now, what the prosecution were trying to do is meet the burden of proof to convince those 12 everyday Americans who made up the jury that Diddy had committed these crimes. The defense, well, they only presented a defense for 30 minutes. They showed some texts that were loving between Cassie and Diddy and Jane, texts where Cassie and Jane were expressing that they were sexually aroused by freak-offs or hotel nights. In their closing arguments, they spoke about Diddy as a philanthropic figure, as a black mogul, as someone who beat the odds and made a name for himself. Now, what they were trying to do is pick holes in the prosecution's argument, and today, the verdict is out. It is not guilty on count 1, racketeering with conspiracy. That's the big one. That's where he was facing life in prison. It is not guilty on count 2, that is sex trafficking in relation to Cassie Ventura, his former romantic partner. It is guilty on count 3, transportation for prostitution in relation to Cassie. It is not guilty on count 4, sex trafficking in relation to Jane, who's using a pseudonym to protect her identity. It is guilty on count 5, transportation for prostitution involving Jane. Now, when it was read out in the courtroom, Diddy kept his head down. There wasn't much emotion from him, but afterwards, he got on his knees, he put his head in the chair in front of him, and he began to pray. While his defense lawyers patted him on the back, they were high-fiving and hugging each other. Make no mistake, although he is guilty on 2 counts, the transportation for prostitution counts, this is a victory for Diddy's defense team. Them getting him acquitted of the biggest counts, racketeering, that is a huge accusation. Him being acquitted of that and sex trafficking is a massive victory for them. And that was reflected in their celebration. The children were clapping. I saw them afterwards. They were dancing down the hallway. His son was kind of skipping. They were high-fiving. His mum gave a thumbs up to the press. Across social media, I can see a lot of people are quite shocked. Some people are celebrating. Some people are waiting to see if he's going to walk out of that courtroom today, and that is a possibility. So we're going to head back inside now and see what the judge has to say. Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's defense, his lead counsel, has requested that he be released on an $1 million bail and that he be allowed to walk out of here today and travel between his Florida, LA, and New York residence. I just came out of the courtroom and Diddy has been denied bail by the judge. He's going to be held until sentencing. He cited the defense's admission that Diddy was a domestic abuser, that he was a violent individual, and that he holds his hands up and he admits it. He put multiple quotes from the trial when they said, if this was a domestic abuse trial, we wouldn't all be sitting here, because he would have owned up to it. The reaction in the room, people were shocked. They thought he was going to be released. There's certainly a precedent for him being released until sentencing, and the defense are arguing it. They tried to argue it again. Mark Agnifilo spoke for a rather long time about all the reasons why this case was unique, but the judge felt that he did not prove clear and convincing evidence, because the burden is now on the defendant to show that he is not a threat to an individual or community. Judge Arun Subramaniam decided that he did not show that clear and convincing evidence. At the moment, the sentencing hearing is scheduled for October, but the prosecution and the defense said they'd work together to speed that process up. But for now, Diddy will be staying behind bars, incarcerated until sentencing. As you guys know, criminal defense attorney Sean Kemp from South Carolina has been with us every step of the way since last November explaining this case, and now he's on a little holiday, a vacation in London, and I'm here in the States, so we've switched, but he's here and he's going to give me his opinion on everything that's gone down. Hi, Sean.
Hey, how are you doing?
You've been with us since November last year. What's your immediate reaction to the verdict?
If you would have told me on day 1 when the indictment came down, or would have asked me what would happen, I would have bet everything in my life there would have been a guilty, because that's what happens when the feds. If you would have then taken me later through the discovery, I think as I talked to y'all, I kept saying, he's going to be in trouble when that superseding indictment comes. And then when the questions started coming out, I think you and I started talking. I think I even made the suggestion that this was a possibility yesterday, because that's the way the tea leaves were writing. And I hold hard to this. You can never you can never predict what a jury will do, ever. And nobody out there saw those freak off tapes or all the videos other than the jury. So I would guess the long and short is say, as of today, I'm not surprised.
And a lot of people at the court, and certainly some of his supporters on social media, are reacting as if this is a completely not guilty verdict. And that's not true. He's been convicted of 2 charges of a serious federal crime. Just talk to me a little bit about the transportation for prostitution crime. How much time could he get for this? What's the severity?
Well, there's a couple of things you need to look at. One, this is a felony. So he is going to be a federally convicted felon, which is not good. That's not something anybody ever grows up and says they want to be a convicted felon. 2, I looked at the guideline range. It looks like he is starting his base offense level is, I think, a level 14, which puts him in the 15 to 21 month range. And then there's some enhancements that could go on top of that. If they say he's a leader, things of that nature, he may be more so looking at the 51 to 61 month range. So I think he's looking at months to years realistically, but he will always be a convicted felon, no matter how much time he gets.
If you had to point out some mistakes that the prosecution made, what would you say?
I am a big fan of the justice system. I believe in our system. 12 strangers picked to make a decision. I believe usually, whether people like to hear it or not, they get it right. When you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, it might be like 2 weeks ago, when you asked how the government had done, I said, what separates this from most federal charges is you never, and I mean never, see a federal case when every single witness has warrants. They were not able to put on one witness who couldn't be properly cross-examined. And that's from Cassie all down. If you look at Cassie, there's a question about their relationship back and forth. If you look at Jane, there was questions back and forth. If you look at Kid Cudi, he didn't see the arson. So every single witness, there was something about them that you couldn't be 100% with certainty.
And when you say warts, you mean, things that raise questions enough such that you can say there's reasonable doubt there. Just talk to me about some of what Cassie had. I know people might be thinking, what do you mean? Cassie got up there and gave an extremely emotional testimony, and she was so young when she met him. What could her warts, if I adopt your phrase, possibly be?
Well, don't forget to prove, and first let's go with the sex trafficking. To prove sex trafficking, they must prove coercion. It's not that they must prove coercion specifically from Cassie's eyes, but they also must prove it from Diddy's eyes. And if you go and you look through all of the text messages, there was a give and take that I enjoyed these things. I love these things. These things were fun for me. And so there was a question back and forth, I think possibly from the jury, that they would say, how would this defendant have known she wasn't into it if she wasn't texting how much she liked it back and forth? I thought a lot of her text messages hurt them. Now, a lot of her testimony was emotional. A lot of her testimony was very strong. A lot of her testimony was credible. But there was also parts of her testimony that you could look at and say, she gave as much as she got. She herself signed off for a lot of the freak offs. So a lot of times what could happen, this jury, believe it or not, possibly just couldn't have liked her. Or they could have said, there's a reasonable doubt. There's so many things that we don't know that could have gone into it, and we won't know until we interview the jury.
When we've been talking about this, you thought it was nonsense that people were saying that Diddy was being targeted or he was receiving harsher treatment because of the color of his skin. This has been an undercurrent of the entire trial. Your reflections on that now, looking at, as a black man in the USA, as a criminal defense attorney in the Deep South, how do you think this plays? Surely this is showing that he was given a free and fair trial.
From me, and I'm glad you asked this question, as an African-American male in the South, it is fascinating for me, for people who are jumping out and down. Puff Daddy, say it if you will, an African-American male with a mostly white jury was able to get a full and fair trial in America, present his side, present his theory, and a jury was able to listen to him and acquit. That never used to happen. So for people to say, and give it to you, maybe he was targeted by race. I don't think he was, but if he was, he still got a fair trial, a full and fair trial. And for the longest in our history, that would never happen. That he wouldn't have gotten a trial. He would have just been shot outside the streets, or they would have just made his decision. Or maybe they would have listened to the TikTok universe who are so emotional. He got a fair trial. And that's kind of why I like our jury system. Without pride or prejudice, you put somebody on stand, you get 12 strangers, and they make a decision. Whether we like it or not, they make a decision, and they did.
Right. But you say, we got 12 ordinary, everyday Americans, they make this decision, but that decision, surely it sets a precedent. We spoke at the beginning of this about the overreaching arm of the federal government taking a peek inside a private individual's bedroom and judging them for their sexual proclivities. Well, now this jury have ruled, this isn't what was going on. The question we ask now is, should they have been there in the first place? Does this impact future cases in that way?
Don't think so, because like I said, every case is different. Now, if you have a future case where a victim files a lawsuit, gets $20 million, goes back and forth, and then all of the other people in the relationship with him get on the stand and talk about how great of a person he is, yeah, it will affect those cases. But in the grand scheme of things, no, I don't think it's going to affect the cases the way that people think. Usually, these types of cases that involve sexual assault and things of this nature are not brought this way. They're usually brought on a state level trial, because here's the thing, a couple of nuances. Had Diddy been convicted of beating Cassie in California back the way he did and something happened, we would not have been here. We wouldn't be here today. So no, I do not think this would affect it. I think this is the government, my belief, I could be wrong, this is the government reading her lawsuit, reading what's going on, and somebody in that office said, I can't believe nothing's ever happened to him. Let's get him.
Talk to me about the level of interest in this trial. You have a very loyal, very large base of followers who have hung on your every word in terms of your legal analysis. This podcast has had so many listeners around the world, people so engaged, developing almost an expert level understanding of the US judicial system. It's been unprecedented, right?
And you are not wrong. And Anushka, I cannot lie to you. I love that so much. I love the fact that people are taking an interest in our system, because too many people don't understand our system and they allow it to happen to them rather than fighting for it. So now we have so many listeners from, you would be surprised the calls and messages I've gotten from the UK now, people trying to understand the system. And I truly believe knowledge is power. And so that's why I got into this, that people now are understanding and they're not being told and lectured. They understand for themselves. And once you understand the system, it becomes powerful. And I love the fact that people actually understand it. Whether they agree with it or not, at least they understand it and can talk intelligently and not guess about it. I think it's going to take a while for a lot of people to digest this verdict. But once they put their bias and prejudices down, I think they will understand the verdict and understand that it is a just verdict when you break down each of the charges. And I think when you hear from the jury, they'll understand that.
The big decision after the verdict was, will he get bail? Judge Arun Subramaniam went with the prosecution on this and said, no, he's going to remain incarcerated until his sentencing. They were offering an $1 million bail. What's your take on that?
I kind of disagree with the judge, even though he is the federal judge. But what ended up happening in the situation is pretty clear. The United States leaned in. They made it clear that they thought he was, the answer to 2 questions, a danger to the community and a risk of flight. They made the assumptions that he would be looking at 20 years. They showed the letter and told him, I think they showed him the letter from Cassie Ventura saying that she's scared, don't let him out, along with some other folks who mentioned that he was a danger and he's scared. And so the judge balanced those questions, and he assumed, is the only thing we can assume, is that he is a risk of flight. And at this point in time, he thought it would be best to deny the bond.
Well, we have people like Deontay Nash writing letters to the judge saying, please, you don't let him out on bail. It's unsafe. Does the judge actually read those letters?
Absolutely. Like I told you, 2 questions he must ask. Danger to the community, and that's first one. The government must show that, or must have shown that he is a true danger, that if he is released, people are in danger. And if he is released, is he going to show back up for court? And so the judge has to read those letters, and he has to make a finding on the record.
Yeah, and like I said, we've seen this forensic interrogation of Diddy as a powerful figure and the position he held in the music industry. And people are starting to really interrogate celebrities, and it makes sense because we spend money on them, we spend time on them, we make space for them in our algorithms and our budgets and occasionally our hearts. And that's why this isn't the end of the road for us, Sean. You can't get rid of me yet, because we have another podcast launching called Fame Under Fire, and it's going to allow us to do just what we've done with the Diddy trial, answer your questions and interrogate those powerful figures, non-traditional powerful figures who have a lot of influence over our lives, over the culture, and have a look at at some of the situations they find themselves in. And of course, as we always do, separate the fact from the fiction. You don't need to do anything. The feed is going to be right here. You stay subscribed, you stay up to date, you stay with us.
Yeah, I am shockingly excited. I thought I was going to end with the Diddy verse, and Anushka, I'm excited that the two of us are going to be doing this together. I think it's fascinating. People have shown that they love the law, they love understanding it. Doing a deep dive with you guys is something that I'm beyond excited about.
Sean, I've said it once, I'll say it 100 times. Thank you so much for your insightful expert analysis throughout this trial.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
That was criminal defense attorney Sean Kent from South Carolina, and that's it for this episode of Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anushka Matanda Dawati. Like I said, watch this space.